Eduard Fosch Villaronga, true trailblazer, with us today, an associate professor and director of research at E-Law Center for Law and Digital Technologies at the University of Leiden, JMCE laureate and principal investigator of Safe and Sound, which explores the legal and regulatory aspects of robot and AI technologies, in particular in the fields of healthcare.
That the world of technology was something that would shake the foundations of the legal system. The law does not know what a robot is. In the law, we have machines, we have the machinery directive, we have toys, we have medical devices, but we do not have the concept of healthcare robots. If you're listening to this podcast, go and work. That we need you. Let's make robots safe and sound.
Welcome to the Just AI Jean Monnet podcast, where esteemed experts from across the globe address the most pressing issues on AI technologies, their regulation, and the resolution of disputes involving them. How can robots and AI systems enhance the state of our health and promote inclusivity? These are in essence the issues that Eduard Fosch Villaronga seeks to answer through the groundbreaking research he conducts within the Safe and Sound and Bias projects. As an associate professor at the University of Leiden, Eduard and his team are currently conducting arduous but also necessary and rewarding research on the ways in which care robots and recruitment algorithms can and even should be designed in order to truly enhance human abilities and equality. One of the deliverables of both projects is to advise policymakers on the best ways forward in regulating care robots and AI systems used in the labor market. So listen carefully as Eduard explains the philosophy, methodology, output, and impact of the Safe and Sound and Bias projects.
Eduard Fosch Villaronga, welcome to the Just AI podcast, which you are kicking off. And you are indeed the first of many exceptional guests we plan to invite to this podcast. And boy, do we start off with a bang. You are an associate professor and director of research at E-Law Center for Law and Digital Technologies at the University of Leiden. Currently, you are an JMCE laureate and principal investigator of Safe and Sound, which is a project which explores the legal and regulatory aspects of robot and AI technologies, in particular in the fields of healthcare, governance, diversity, and privacy. You are also the PI for the legal part of the Horizon Project Bias, which is mitigating diversity biases of AI in the labor market. And so going by these few lines, it is quite obvious that we have the privilege of having a true trailblazer with us today. So thank you for that. But beyond the many accolades and accomplishments that one can list about you, I would like for us to maybe begin with a personal story. If you were to say a few words on your background and the evolution of your brand of research, so to speak, what were the pivotal moments in your training and career where you decided that you wanted to focus on automation and in particular in the fields of healthcare and diversity and non-discrimination?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me at the podcast. Congratulations in getting the Jean Monnet on this amazing topic, fairness and artificial intelligence. I think that it's really, really hot. So I'm very honored to be here. And thanks for the kind introduction. I think that once you list all of the things that we do in academia, then it looks a lot, but everything has been done one step by step. And it's also true. I also had to start, as many of the listeners of this podcast will have. So my start was that I studied European integration, and at some point, I was very curious about the field of data protection and privacy. I only had a course when I was at the University of Toulouse on that, but that sort of started giving me a little bit of an understanding that the world of technology was something that would shake the foundations of the legal system, which I studied the previous years. And together with that, and then another master's that I did in which I delved into cloud computing topics, I entered into a PhD program that was an international program called Erasmus Mundus in law, science, and technology. And my idea was really like to do cloud computing and privacy, but the committee felt that it would not be that innovative once I would finish the program. So they suggested me to delve into new topics on that. So that was actually quite an important moment for me, because then like I was doing research and I heard the lecture that Kay Darling at Harvard at the Bergman Klein Center did like on robot ethics, and I started thinking, oh, exactly, like robots are actually like coming, like, and there's not that much in the legal field in that. And at the beginning, I thought about working on self-driving cars, but then I thought, well, that sounds a bit of a boring topic. I thought at the time, like I thought, well, perhaps like now the US, they have like some regulatory advancements in this, and I could do the European version of it. Then I thought, oh, perhaps like drone technology, but that was redirecting me to the military field and so, and it was not talking to me, no. But then I went to this workshop in Lausanne on medical and service robotics, and that very much like touched me and very much like connected with my family, I think. And at the moment they were presenting exoskeletons, so like robots that help wheelchair users to stand up and walk, and they were even presenting the one that used the brain computer interfaces, so the ones that use the mind in order to make the movements that kicked the World Cup in Brazil at the time. But then they also presented a little robot that was checking whether the person, the elderly person, like would be in the room sleeping during the night or in the kitchen during the eating times. And that connected with my grandma, because we found my grandma for 3 or 4 times laying down on the floor. She had fallen. She forgot to use the little thingy to call the ambulance, because at some point, like, she thought, oh no, they come at night because I'm sleeping with this thing. And the thing is that we luckily found her because we went to the house, no, like, but then my grandma was dehydrated, having done peeing and poop like all over the place. She couldn't get up or anything. And at that time, like when I was actually in this workshop, I thought, wow, like if we had like a little robot, like that we could move around and like check like whether she was okay, why she was not picking the phone, and so like that would have increased our reaction time, no? And it was actually in that moment that I thought, yeah, like this is talking to me, and if I really want to spend my future working on the field of robotics, why not exploring these robots that seem to be helping people, and the promise it's great, but I also had like so many questions at the legal side. And that is exactly why 10 years ago already, I started working on the field of healthcare robotics.
Mm. It's very you mentioned something that I think is quite true for most of us. It's well, at least for me, our choices of topics of research are rarely a coincidence. When you look at like the personal story, right, and the personal background of the researcher. So in my case, it's evidence and justice, but this podcast is not about me. But I completely relate to what you said, in the sense that, well, there's an aspect of your personal life that ties into an area of interest, an area of research, and your intuition, it turns out, was spot on. So let's talk a little bit about the Safe and Sound project. So how did you get the idea for this project? First of all, can you briefly describe what the project is trying to accomplish and will accomplish? And in many ways, in the words that you want to choose to describe this project, but also what I would in particular want to know, because I will ask you afterwards a few questions on the EU's legislation of artificial intelligence. So I was wondering, what is the doctrinal and regulatory gap that this project is going to fill, once it comes to its term?
Yeah, definitely. So the ERC 13 grant Safe and Sound has the ambition to connect the policy cycle with data generated in robot testing zones to support evidence-based policymaking for robot technologies. What I noticed over these years is that there is an increasing gap between the policy cycle's speed and that of the technological change. And this gap is very noticeable in healthcare robotics, where policies and laws are scattered and cover the issues and the problems that robots entail for society unevenly. And this disconnect results in several things, most importantly in robot developers failing to integrate essential legal considerations into their designs, user safety not always being ensured, and the development of systems that may cause harm to patients. And while other sectors enjoy evidence-based policies that translate policy goals into practical guidance, these frameworks have yet to emerge for robot technology. So the idea actually, and what I wanted to share is that I've been working a lot on these topics in the past. So it's been a journey. It is not an idea that came out of the blue. Over the years, I realized that it was not only robots that had an impact on users at many levels, privacy, dignity, and so, but also the very same frameworks were impeding developers from implementing these rules. So, like, we need to think that the laws were enacted in a moment in time in which perhaps these robots were not capable to do what they can do right now. So there are like these dissonances that it is not fair, no? Talking about fairness, it's not that fair to say to robot developers, oh, you're not complying with the law. No, actually, we need to have a more of a overarching view to the problem, and also acknowledge that even if the law works, as I usually call it, in the Rococo horror vacui mode, like or horror lacunae, we would say, no? Like we regulate everything. It's also true that the majority of the laws that we have may not frame these developments correctly. So the idea that I have, or when you ask me what is the doctrinal or regulatory gap, I want to solve actually a dilemma, the Collingridge dilemma, that basically says that it's a little bit unclear when do we need to regulate technology. If we regulate it too early, we might impede innovation. And if it is too late, there might be some impacts that they might have already been done. So the idea is that using testing zones in this respect, as we are going to do in our project, is basically the perfect moment to generate policy relevant data that can support two changes. They can support robot development, so like we can learn what works and what doesn't work for robot technologies, and then because they are not yet into the market, we can redesign these robots according to that. But then the very same knowledge can actually inform policies so that we can over time also learn what works and what doesn't work. So that's a little bit like how I came about like with the idea, but also like what we try to achieve.
Right. And so, one of the things that I kind of react to in terms of Pavlovian reflex is when you mention evidence-based policy. And so I wondered, how do you go about gathering the evidence? Like, what is the methodology that you use to get that information? And then how do you translate it into a regulatory proposal?
Yeah, definitely. So what we do, it is actually we have different research objectives. So like the one is that we try to identify the regulatory gaps for personal care robots. And we do that with different ways. We do systematic reviews, like on what did the literature say about these. We also are going to have expert workshops with both policymakers. It's going to be facilitated by the John Research Center, which is like the institution, the independent institution for science for policy of the European level. We are also engaging in conversations with ISO, and in the Netherlands it's called NEN. So basically, I just sent an email this morning, because we want to be part of the revision of this standard. And we're going to be interviewing patient organizations via the European Disability Forum, and also developers, which usually they go to these testing zones that we have. So the idea is that we believe that we can identify which are these dissonances between the law and these robots from different sources. And we want to capture that as much as possible at the beginning of our project, because then what we want to do, it is actually to test, well, we want to devise the test and then, of course, test these uncovered legal challenges for personal care robots in testing zones that the European Union has created for these types of technologies, that they were created by a European project called Eurobench. And then the idea is that in these testing zones, there's actually a lot of things that sometimes my researchers, they say, but Eduard, where's the law in what we're doing? No, because in that testing zone, we have sensors, we try to measure the heart rate of the subjects. We put the subjects with the robots, we do the experiments. So we ask them to walk in uneven terrains. We ask them to climb stairs. We ask them to do several experiments, and I have some examples to share with you if you want, in order to understand how are they performing the experiments, and then whether there is something that we need to change or not. No, so the idea is that then with all of this data, that it is usually combines quantitative data, and more objective data like the heart rate or the galvanic response, with then interviews about their experience. We can understand more about how did they experience certain things, and then whether there's something that needs to be done about it.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations, because it does seem extremely interesting. And yes, if you do have any examples or anecdotes, those would be very, very interesting and fun to hear. But I know that in recent years, even before the launching of Safe and Sound, I know that you were thinking a lot about product safety and how it ties into exoskeletal devices, for example, or in general AI that is used in the healthcare field. And I know, if I recall correctly, in one of your publications, you were maybe considering not only the product liability directive, but also the medical device legislation and also toys, because at some point you said, well, or again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading a paper of yours where you said, well, it's not always self-evident that a device will be used for medical purposes, right? So depending on how you kind of qualify the device, different legislation is likely to apply. Okay. But the umbrella concept here being safety, product safety. So which safety standard should be applied to XYZ devices that we use in healthcare? But now we have the AI Act. And as you know, the AI Act lists in Annex 3 the medical devices legislation, the toys legislation as well. We will have a revised product liability directive. And by the way, the Annex 2 is there to kind of help us identify what the AI Act qualifies as high-risk systems. And so I wanted to, since you are also working on regulatory proposals, or kind of coming up with a regulatory model that could be used in robotics that are used in healthcare. What do you think of the AI Act? Is it, as a general opinion of that legislation? And, I guess I have a few questions, a few points that I'm curious about with regard to the AI Act. But first of all, like on a very, very general level, what do you think about this kind of hybrid combined approach that the AI Act seems to epitomize, which is risks and rights? Yes.
So first, on the precision that you made, I think that this is exactly, you remember correctly. Like, so the thing is that the law does not really think in robot terms, no? Like we have other types of categories. And actually, I didn't get like this grant that we mentioned before, because there was this reviewer said, but what is a healthcare robot? No? And yeah, to me and to any mechanical engineer working in this field totally understands what's a healthcare robot. But then I understood that the law does not know what a robot is. In the law, we have machines, no? We have the machinery directive. As you said, we have the product that can be safety ex ante, like or liability exposed. We have toys, we have medical devices, but we do not have like the concept of healthcare robots. And I think that that is the niche that that my line of research has been trying to fill, is with these new kinds of robots that they are called service robotics, that they are not for industrial applications, so they are not machinery, and they are not medical devices, so they are not medical. So in a way, years ago, it seemed that the industry tried to create this new category, which was a little bit in between, no? That it would be for things that go as simple as the vacuum cleaners, for instance, that they are robotized, to other more complex robots like exoskeletons, which create the confusion on whether these to use by certain type of populations, whether they are indeed medical devices or not, no? And then the AI Act, of course, represents a significant step in regulating artificial intelligence, especially because it emphasizes this risk and rights-based approach, and the standards outlined there like also aim to address concerns associated with these AI systems. So in principle, when applied to personal care robots, these standards could contribute to ensuring ethical use and safeguarding patient well-being. However, the effectiveness of these standards in preventing risk and protecting patients depends on, for instance, the creation. No, we are talking about co-regulation, and we know that the co-regulation suggests that then we're going to use standardization bodies that they are going to be responsible for creating these standards. But we recently got a prize together with another researcher, Hadassah Drukar, on product safety. And the Product Safety Award recognized that our work could inform robots, because we were saying that diversity plays a role in ensuring robot safety. But what we also did that was appreciated by the jury is that our work suggests that also standardization activities could benefit from being much more diverse. So what we know is that these standard committees usually they work in a majority of the voting system, but it's only on the people that they are there on the table. But you need to pay in order to be part of these committees. The target or affected users are not invited to the table. So the voices of those that they are going to be affected by these standards are usually not present. So although they are much more specific than general pieces of legislation that may write down like the goals and the ideals that we have at the European level with respect of what is the ideal scenario with these advancements, they lack a little bit like this diversity, no? And then that is just like one of the aspects. But then also what it is interesting, at least like in this case, is that it seems that robots are like outdated all of a sudden, no? Like I think that like with some colleagues, like we talk about like um, these legal bubbles, no? Like so like these sort of hypes on what we call it like the competing legal futures. So like somehow like companies like create technological solutions, cloud computing, blockchain, and many things, and they sort of bet in these potential futures, no, that they have. And the thing is that when you create new technology, usually there might or might not be a follow-up with respect to the legal domain. So like it might be that these competing legal features, one of them may include a regulation or not on this. So like we didn't really have that much regulation like the blockchain law, or like we didn't have the cloud computing law, like we didn't have the robot law, like but now we have the AI Act, no? So those robots that they do not incorporate any artificial intelligence system then would be excluded by the scope of this legislation, because this legislation is trying to regulate like the artificial intelligence system. However, there are like many other robots that they are outside of this. Although I do appreciate how comprehensive, at least it tries to be, you know, the AI Act establishing roles and responsibilities for the different manufacturers, and also mentioning a lot of important topics like diversity and biases, and so I think that whereas the AI Act provides this baseline, additional measures may be necessary, especially in rapidly advancing technologies like personal care robots, and concepts that are less measurable, like transparency, diversity. There might be like some concepts that that the standardization bodies may struggle to come up with technical standards for those.
Yes, indeed. So I would have, following up on that, I would have two additional questions. One that is more focused on the AI Act, and the other one that is more focused on maybe the output of Safe and Sound, and like the philosophy and rationale behind you know, the regulatory models that will at the end of the day be kind of presented as a deliverable. So and you're completely right, you know, not all robots use artificial intelligence, so presumably the AI Act would only cover those that integrate or some aspect or some kind of intelligence within them, or, you know, are a component, as the AI Act says, are a component of a product that integrate anyway. So you know, but in my own work, I have reflected a lot about whether all those requirements that, you know, and if you look at the evolution of the AI Act, starting with the high-level expert group and, you know, all the soft law from the Commission, from the European Parliament, and including the Council, that, you know, for a period of 2 or 3 years, everybody was kind of brainstorming about, you know, what is the best way to approach regulating artificial intelligence, be it software or like tangible systems like robots to integrate artificial intelligence. And so we came up with this tetrarchy of ethical principles that were suggested by the high-level expert group that progressively were translated into technical standards. And one of the questions that I kind of addressed in my own research is, can we, are those technical standards really, or were they the right way to go? In a sense that, you know, you can obviously, can you standardize explainability? Can you standardize human control and oversight? Can you standardize transparency? You know, so, you know, if one wants to be critical, one would, you know, I don't know. I was thinking a lot about this prior to this conversation with you, because, as you also mentioned in your previous publications, usually when we think of product safety, we think about material safety or protection against, I don't know, chemicals, for example. So these are risks that are measurable in many ways, right? And with artificial systems, the AI Act defines the notion of risk as a violation of a fundamental right, which is not measurable. You cannot say there is a, if you use a biometric identification system, there's a 70% chance that your right to privacy will be violated, right? So it's not, I wasn't sure how much of that product safety logic can be transposed in a regulatory approach that seeks to protect fundamental rights. But anyway, that's my own personal opinion. So I really liked this idea of your vision of saying that the AI Act perhaps establishes kind of like a baseline level, and then maybe sectoral legislation will begin to emerge that will particularize the standards that are enshrined in the AI Act.
And I want to say a couple of things here. Like, so one of them is that I do agree, no? Like, so it may be difficult to standardize explainability. But that is why throughout my work, I always was much more fan of a technology assessment. Like for my thesis at the time, I tried to devise what I called the care robot impact assessment, like in a way, which I think that now in this ERC project, like we are going to sort of like try to think a little bit more carefully and perhaps like trying to work on it, because there is this push for the fundamental right impact assessment, like for the AI Act. And so, however, that can remain very vague and very difficult to implement. And I think that because I've been working a lot with robotics and different types of embodied agents, I see that these principles are going to be manifested in various ways depending on how the robot looks like. Some robots, they move around the floor, they navigate. Some of them they are outdoors, for instance. Some of them they fly. Some of them they have cameras. Some of them they can hear you. Some of them you are wearing them and they help you to perform a task. So it is not the robot performing the task for you. So because of that, it is a little bit difficult not to say like, oh, we're going to standardize explainability. That is very difficult. But when it comes to a specific group of technologies, no, let's say like exoskeletons or lower limb exoskeletons, no, these robots that help people stand up and walk, they share similarities. And then, of course, privacy is important, no, but then it's like, okay, perhaps in this case, it is more bodily privacy, perhaps it's more behavioral privacy, and perhaps there are like certain aspects that they do not apply, like because, for instance, when it comes to transparency or explainability, which in this case would be intelligibility of the robot action, that perhaps like in a social robot, it is more important. But because you are wearing the robot and the robot supports you, perhaps that is not that important in that particular case. No, so like without disregarding the importance of these goals, I think that we will see, and that is why I think that we do need somehow like this industry that is going to be working towards trying to interpret and also translate how these goals, how this baseline applies to concrete cases. And I think that this is the idea of our work, is that then these knowledge, we can capture then these lessons learned, and they can be redirected back to all of these policymakers, and so that they could compromise, like to say every 4 years, like with the standards, like they are revised, and they are like saying, well, until now we gathered this knowledge and we know that this is like this, and then we are going to revise. But we want them to revise them, no? Like the ISO standard that I worked intensively with, it was enacted in 2014. I worked a lot on these topics. Many other researchers have worked. In 2020, the standard was revised, but was remained as it was. So there were like no modifications whatsoever. whereas there had been many problems with the standard. So there needs to be this compromise, no? The other thing that I wanted to say connected with this is that indeed there is, for instance, when you're saying safety, that there are like very difficult things to mention. I was part of the group of experts that they call it, revising the product safety. Now it's called regulation. It was a very difficult conversation. Like, it was fruitful, it was really enriching, and it also tells you like how difficult it is, the policy making process. But we are extremely proud to say that, for instance, in recital 19, says that the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. But also, we managed to say, recital 23, that the safety of a product should be assessed, Those risks can also include environmental, but then it says the assessment should take into account the health risks posed by digitally connected products, including the risk to mental health, especially of vulnerable consumers, and in particular, children. Now, when you look at the whole standard, the whole regulation, there is no more understanding of this. Like, we didn't manage to get any of these mental aspects within the product safety regulation. We push for it. We understand safety as, I think that the contemporary understanding of safety is that it needs to be more comprehensive, like that includes the physical and the mental, the social. It also has a temporal effect, no? Like, it might be that you are continuous using some technology and that the impacts do not appear until a later period of time. And so there are like many different dimensions of safety that they are not that well captured yet by the legislation. And that, as you say, I think that still much more work needs to be done in order to put forward these alerts, because in the end, it's like we are alerting that it's not that we do not want companies to thrive and to advance. We want to make products that they are safe for everyone to use.
Indeed, and that kind of sets the scene for my next big idea, which is also coincidentally the theme of the Just AI Center of Excellence, which is fairness. We focus on procedural fairness, and you're so right when you mentioned that defining a standard of safety, a uniform standard of safety that would apply across all new technologies is indeed extremely difficult. I work in particular with the Product Liability Directive and the revised Product Liability Directive, and as you know, standards of safety are defined as in reference to the expectations of safety given the intended use of the product, et cetera, which we have decades of ECJ case law showing that defining in a set in stone kind of way an expectation of safety from the consumers is next to impossible. So it's really kind of sector by sector and case by case. And I do agree with you. I think what we are also trying to do is to maybe delve into or monitor the practice, but the practice that we are monitoring is court practice. So cases where harm does occur, and then litigants come forward and say, well, this was how I expected the product to work. It did not. This was the standard of safety that I wanted to be applied to myself, and for some reason it failed, right? And then in Liège, what we are trying to do, well, some of us, what we are trying to do is kind of inquire what explainability might mean in that sense, right? In an adjudicatory context where you are a litigant and you're giving an explanation, but also asking for an explanation from the manufacturer or from the programmer, and you need information in order for you to then make a claim to compensation. So all of this kind of brings me to fairness and the standard, a standard of fairness as a standard for both substantive legislation, which you're working on, but also as a standard for procedural frameworks and legislation that we are working on. So how do you, and you mentioned, this, the, shall we say, definition of what health is, and so I wondered, well, does the Safe and Sound project kind of have a standard of fairness in the backdrop? How does it see itself contributing to kind of upholding a standard of fairness in the field of robotics for patients, and improving their well-being, et cetera, et cetera? So could you say a few words on that?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, indeed, the fairness is indeed a crucial aspect of our project's goal to develop this evidence-based regulatory model for personal care robots. And in this precise context, fairness extends to ensuring equitable access, treatment, and outcomes for all users, irrespective of factors like age, gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. And I have here a concrete example that we found out throughout this project, in which we started doing the experiments, and then we realized that with a female subject, the exoskeleton was actually like to its maximum capacity, was making strange noises, and the person reported that she was not feeling comfortable, that the device was hurting her. And when then we looked at the data, we realized that she was more stressed and also spent more energy while doing the same experiments as the other male counterpartner. And what we understood then is that when we started looking at the standard and what were the safety parameters for different genders, we realized that the standard did not include those. Now, why that is so problematic is that we could have robot developers assessing their devices against the safety parameters of this standard, which does not include these gender differences, and then get certified and place their product into the market, which is clearly going to harm women in ways that we cannot really anticipate. So our work at the ERC Safe and Sound project very much is looking at these aspects, at trying to make visible these connections that until now we might have some assumptions that they are working. So for instance, this dimension between gender and safety, but also other aspects that we do not know right now, like between race and safety, for instance. No. So to understand fairness in connection of personal care robots, our empirical data collection will focus on diverse user experiences and these potential biases in deploying and using these robots, which will range from algorithmic bias, cultural sensibility, accessibility concerns. No, we realized also that not even the testing zone was prepared to accommodate the person with a condition. So we had to halt the experiments that we were going to do with the wheelchair user because the device was not powerful enough, which was strange because you might think, well, but wheelchair users may be overweight, so it is strange that the device cannot handle a little bit more of weight, because that's something expected. No, you said the expectancy, no, of the performance, of course, the safety, but also the expectancy, no, because your target population is that one. So yeah, so basically we really want to assess how these robots interact with diverse user populations and strive to mitigate any biases or discriminatory effects that may be identified. And the goal is to develop these regulatory guidelines that promote the effectiveness, safety, and fairness of personal care robots, so that we can ensure a fair and equitable treatment across various demographics in this case. No?
Yes, indeed. I think that so much of our understanding of fairness is infused by our understanding of human dignity, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is what we are actually, that's our kind of benchmark, that's our reference point. And also, I'm thinking of this while I listened to you talk, but I also remember that you wrote something on human dignity, and I was very, very happy to see that you referenced Martha Nussbaum, who is one of my gurus when it comes to fairness and justice theory. So anyway, but you also, so yes, I do think that conceptually speaking, maybe human dignity is in the core of what all of us are doing while exploring various aspects of AI and AI regulation. But just I see that we are kind of approaching the end of this recording, and which is in a way unfortunate because I feel like we could talk for hours. But you mentioned discrimination and diversity and inclusivity, and that of course made me think of your other big project, which is the Bias Project. So could you tell us a little bit more about that project and how, what are you working on specifically, and what are you discovering within that project?
Yeah, definitely. So the other project that you mentioned is the Horizon Project Bias, and basically it's funded by the European Union, and we will empower AI and human resource management communities by addressing and mitigating algorithmic biases. So the premise or the context of the Bias Project is that AI is increasingly being deployed in the labor market to recruit, to train, or to engage employees or monitor infractions that can lead to disciplinary proceedings. No? And one of the AI systems or like techniques that is being used is the natural language processing based tools that can analyze text that make inferences about the workers and help support decisions. Now, the problem is that these NLP-based systems face the implicit biases of the models that they are based upon, that they learn. No? So such biases can be encoded into the data used for machine learning training, for instance, which may contain stereotypes of our society, and can thus be reflected inside the models and the decision making. The problem is that these can lead to partial decisions that run contrary to the goals of the European Union and also the United Nations. And so despite a strong desire in Europe to ensure equality in employment, most of the studies of European labor markets have concluded that there is a discrimination across many factors, such as gender, nationality, or sexual orientation. So therefore, like this project it tries to address how AI used in the labor market either contributes or can help mitigate this discrimination, which is of great importance. No? And in particular, in that project, like what Leiden University is doing is to trying to understand or to gain new and consolidated knowledge about fairness and AI in the labor market through multidisciplinary and cross-sector lenses. And all of that knowledge, which includes interviews with AI developers, interviews with HR practitioners. We have more than 70 across Europe. We have also tried to survey the public, the workers' attitudes towards automation. We had more than 5,700 responses also, so we're trying to capture that. We did literature review, and then all of that has created the foundations to create what we call the debiaser. So basically that's going to be a technical tool that our technical partners are working on that basically works, we call it as a sort of like Grammarly, like in the sense that we are going to try to try to use these systems to identify these parts of the applications of the workers or other documents that they have to submit, so that then we can empower HR practitioners into their decision making to highlight all of these biases. No, so. And all of this, we are doing it also with a co-creational approach. So basically, we are also holding workshops across Europe in which we invite all of these different stakeholders, that they are in the table, they are all sharing their knowledge, their experiences, also their desires, no, like how would a technique like this look like, and so. And I'm happy to say that after only 1 year of this project, we learned a lot, but we are already having like a pilot like of this tool, and it does make the difference. Like so, I think that by the end of this project, still we have 3 more years to go. I am confident that we are going to do something that will make a huge step forward in ensuring trustworthy AI for the labor market.
Great. And now, finally, the final question is the message, right? So, if there was a providential regulator or business or in AI business or whatever, or just a regular layman person who listened to this podcast, what would you tell them? What would be the takeaway from your work? What would be the thing that we need to pay attention to? What would be the advice, moving forward?
Difficult position. Like first, I would say don't forget the robots. We know that there's a lot of AI and interesting stuff, but the robots are actually everywhere. You know, like we have milking robots that they're like helping milk the cows. Like we have robots like under the sea. We have airplanes are automated. You know, like so robots are coming if they are not there yet. So I think that if a regulator would listen to this, I would say let's get that evidence. Let's get those discussions grounded. Like let's understand how these ideals are really transforming into these specific cases, because it changes a lot. No, if a machine has destructive forces, it's very different if it is within a factory that can be caged and can be separated with a human. So, but if these systems are going to be interacting with us, safety, it's very different, right? Like we are humans, we have a physical aspect, we have a mental aspect, we are also embedded in a context. So this is very important. If also AI systems like are actually using data from the past to predict the future, we're saying that they are future past replicators, like in a way, like so, like we really also want to pay attention to that. So what we see is that these assessments will need to be carefully done in a case-by-case basis, and that don't be afraid to have a public mandate to companies to share these lessons learned. Like we want to improve the safety of all of these systems, however they look like. And this knowledge, we do not know how to capture it, right? So like if you are asking like for these impact assessments, for, fundamental rights, like in my case, I would very much appreciate like a technology assessment, not to be much more concrete. Then gather this information, process this information, try to understand like what are the standards, like then try to have an independent committee that it is having a look at this, like is this really diverse, is this inclusive, is this fair, no? So I think that that would be a little bit my message, but for sure that we need more work in making the visible in the invisible visible, and how all of these invisible links impact safety, no, gender, diversity, and transparency. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're a researcher, for instance, go and work. That we need you. We need more people working on these topics. If you are like someone developing these systems, if you are like a regulator also, think about this. Like think about diversity, think about safety, think about whether you've done everything you have in your power to make sure that this is safe to use. Let's make robots safe and sound.
Yes. Okay. Well, Edward, many thanks for this very stimulating and insightful conversation. I really had a lovely, lovely time. Thank you again for being the first guest of our podcast.
Thank you also like to provide us this platform. Like we are thankful because like it's thanks to this kind of podcast also that our ideas get out there and that you help us disseminate and communicate also the work that we do. So thank you, because this is very much needed. So thank you to you and to your team.
Thank you for watching an episode of the Just AI Jean Monnet podcast, brought to you by the team of the Just AI Jean Monnet Center of Excellence and supported by the European Commission through the Erasmus Plus program. Keep an eye out for upcoming podcast episodes where experts in the field of AI will delve into the significant risks posed by these technologies and propose potential solutions. Stay tuned for many exciting and insightful discussions to come.